What if everything you've been taught about the history of ancient Israel was just a thin veil thrown over the truth? Not out of faith, but for the sake of politics, power, and control of land. Right now, the word Jewish is used to describe one of the most studied people groups in history. But there's a question here that almost no one dares to ask out loud. What does this word really mean? Where did it come from? And most importantly, does the linguistic code match the story we've been told? Because today, we're about to do something dangerous. We're about to crack the code of the English language and compare it to ancient texts that predate modern empires by thousands of years. What we've discovered isn't just a linguistic error, it's a legal and historical clue left beneath the surface. We'll see how one tiny morpheme in language completely changed the ownership of an entire land and erased the identity of an entire people. This isn't a political statement or an attack on anyone's faith. This is a question of historical and intellectual integrity. And today, we will follow this question wherever it leads. Take a moment and listen to the word itself. Jew-ish. In English, which has become the global language of science and law, the suffix -ish serves a very specific and unchanging function. Think about how we use it in everyday life without thinking about the consequences. If you say that an object is greenish, does that mean that the object is actually green? No. It means that it looks green. It is on the green spectrum. It has qualities of green, but it is not the color itself in its purest form. If you call someone's behavior boyish, does that mean they are a boy? No. It means they are an adult who imitates the behavior of a boy or possesses his characteristics. Calling an action foolish doesn't make the person inherently foolish. It merely describes an action that resembles the action of a fool. So what does the word Jewish actually mean, according to all the rules of grammar and logic? It means approximately Jewish, apparently from Judah, having characteristics associated with the original but not being the original itself. It's a linguistic approximation. And here, a terrifying question arises. Why did this suffix become attached to this particular people? Was it an innocent whim of translators, or are we dealing with a brilliant act of legal substitution, where the status of the original was transferred to a simulacrum? To understand the scale of this substitution, we must return to our origins. Forget English, Latin, and Greek for a moment. We must return to a time when there were no modern names, but only the dust of roads and the sound of blood. The original word used in the most ancient Torah scrolls to describe Abraham and his descendants is Ivri. Say it out loud. Ivri. In the ancient Semitic world, this word carried tremendous dynamic connotations. It comes from the root avar, which literally means to cross, to traverse, to be on the other side. Ivri means one who has crossed the river. It was not a religious title. It was not a denomination one could sign up for. It was an ethnic, geographic, and blood identifier. Abraham was called Ivri because he physically crossed the Euphrates. He left the world of Mesopotamian cities and entered the status of a wanderer, separated from other peoples by the very fact of his crossing. It was an ancestral identity, passed down from father to son. If you were Ivri, you were a direct genetic descendant of Eber, the great-grandson of Shem. It was a bloodline as distinct as the riverbed their ancestor crossed. But consider what happens to this word in the process of colonizing history. At what point did Ivri become Hebrews, and then Jews, and finally Jewish? Most official historians will tell you this is the natural evolution of language. But history is not a random process. It is always written by victors and administrators. In 1611, when King James I of England authorized the translation of the Bible, his scholars faced a task that went far beyond linguistics. They needed to create a text that would be understandable to the English-speaking world, but also serve the interests of the crown and the new imperial theology. It was during this period that the ancient word Yehudi, which had always meant an inhabitant of the specific territory of Judea or a direct descendant of the tribe of Judah, began to transform into the English Jew. But the word Jew is a linguistic stub. It's torn from its Semitic context. The original Yehudi contains the root Yah, which indicates praise to the Almighty and a direct theocratic origin. By removing this root and adding the suffix ish, translators and ideologists accomplished something incredible. They transformed blood, ancestral ties, into an open category. Consider the consequences of this move. If a person of any race and any origin decides to convert to the Judaism religion, they will become Jewish. According to modern laws, they will become Jewish. But will this make them Jewish by blood? Will it give them the genetic memory of those who crossed the Euphrates 4,000 years ago? Grammar says no. Genetics says no. The very logic of history says no. Yet modern political and religious discourse insists otherwise. We have been led to believe that Jewish is the very same biblical Israelites. But the suffix ish stands as a silent witness, reminding us this is only a similarity. It is something that has the properties of the original, but not the original itself. And here we come to the most pressing question of our investigation. If the modern definition of Jew is a religious and legal construct, then where have those who were Jewish by blood disappeared to? Where have those tribes gone, whose identity was tied to DNA and geography, not the philosophical doctrines of medieval Europe? The confusion didn't begin with the English. It has roots much deeper in time. In the 3rd century BCE, in Alexandria, the intellectual center of the Greek world, an event occurred that can be called the First Great Substitution. 70 scholars translated the Hebrew Torah into Greek, creating the Septuagint. This was the moment when Semitic thought was forcibly squeezed into the framework of Western philosophy. Greek is a language of abstractions. By translating Hebrew as Hebraios, Greek scribes began to divorce the meaning of the word from its living, grounded reality. They transformed a family name into a cultural definition. Why was this important for the Ptolemies and later the Roman Empire? Because empires abhor blood exclusivity. They need subjects whose identity can be classified and controlled. They didn't need people who crossed the river, claiming exclusive rights to the land based on ancestral covenants. They needed groups united by common customs that could be incorporated into the administrative structure of the state. It was during this period that the names of the tribes of Israel on maps began to be replaced by the names of administrative provinces. Blood was replaced by territory. If you look at the maps of that time and compare them with the Septuagint texts, you will see how the foundation for future legal fraud was being laid. A terminological trap was created. If a Jew is simply a resident of the province of Judea, then anyone who settles there, be they Idumean, Greek, or Roman, could eventually lay claim to that name. But if Ivri is a closed genetic line descending from Abraham, then ownership of the inheritance cannot be acquired through assimilation or imperial decree. It can only be inherited. We see how, step by step, linguistics has been used to blur the boundaries of the chosen people, transforming it from the biological reality into a philosophical category that anyone could eventually incorporate. I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, could such a chain of errors and transformations be random? Why, at every historical juncture, from Alexandria to London, were words changed to sever the genetic root and replace it with a religious or territorial label? This isn't just a game of etymology, it's a battle for the right to be called the heir. We're dealing with a process I call linguistic colonization. When you take away a people's original name, Ivri, and replace it with an administrative label with the suffix ish, you deprive them of their connection to their land at the deepest, most subconscious level. Today, millions of people around the world read the Bible and see the word Jews there, not realizing that this word is a pale shadow of the original. They don't see those who crossed the river. They see a religious group formed in medieval Europe. And this gap between text and reality is the key to understanding all the contemporary conflicts in the Middle East. Who really owns the land? Those who are Jewish by passport and religion, or those who carry the markers of ancient Hebrews in their DNA? We have only just begun this investigation. Beneath the layers of words lie layers of history, hidden in maps and forgotten chronicles. If the linguistic trap we discussed was the lock, then history is the key that turns in that lock with a deafening creak. We have established that the word Jewish, according to all the rules of grammar, describes something similar to the original, but not the original itself. Now we need to understand how this semblance acquired flesh, blood, and state borders. To do this, we must travel to a place that most modern history books studiously avoid. This is the story of a forgotten empire that didn't simply adopt a religion, but carried out one of the most massive identity thefts in the annals of humanity. We travel to 740 AD, to the vast steppes between the Black and Caspian Seas. Here, at the crossroads of worlds, the Khazar Khaganate flourished. It was a powerful Turkic people, in Khazars, traders, and strategists. They were not Semites. They were not descendants of Abraham. They had no connection to the sands of Sinai or the waters of the Jordan. The Khazars were a steppe people whose roots lay in Central Asia. But the Khazar Empire found itself caught between the expanding Islamic Caliphate to the south and Christian Byzantium to the west. Both superpowers of the time demanded that the Khazar king, Bulan, convert to their faith. It was a political checkmate. If Bulan chose Islam, he would become an enemy of Byzantium. If he chose Christianity, he would fall under the blows of the Caliphate. And then Bulan made a decision that echoes in today's news. He chose the third way. He ordered his elite and his people to convert to Judaism. Not because of divine revelation or love for the Torah. It was a brilliant geopolitical maneuver. By embracing the faith of the ancient prophets, Khazaria became a neutral zone, maintaining its independence from both warring camps. But look at the consequences. An entire Turkic people began calling themselves Jews. They adopted the customs, the laws, and, most importantly, the name. And this is where the suffix ish acquires its true historical meaning. The Khazars became Jewish in the most literal sense. They became people who imitated the Jews, who followed their way of life, but whose blood belonged to the steppes of Eurasia. Now you might ask, this is just old history. What does it have to do with us today? But here comes science, which knows no lies. Genetics. In 2012, Dr. Eran El-Haik, a geneticist at Johns Hopkins University, published a study that sent shockwaves through the academic community. He analyzed the genomes of modern Ashkenazi Jews and discovered that their genetic signature leads not to Palestine, but to the foothills of the Caucasus and the Khazar steppes. This is confirmed by an even more astonishing fact. A 2006 study showed that 40% of all Ashkenazim, millions of people, are descended from just 4 women. And these founding mothers weren't from the Levant. They were European. Traditional Jewish tradition holds that Jewishness is transmitted through the mother. But if the mothers were European and the fathers were Turkic Khazars, what does this tell us about the origins of those who today call themselves the heirs of ancient Israel? It tells us that the -ish suffix isn't just a quirk of the English language, it's a genetic reality. While one group of people on the Eurasian steppes assumed the mantle of the chosen people, what was happening to those who were truly Ivri? Where did those whose ancestors crossed the river go? And here, our investigation takes a most unexpected turn. We must look at a map you'll never see in a school atlas. In 1747, Emmanuel Bowen, the official cartographer to King George II of England, created a detailed map of Africa. This wasn't a sketch by a self-taught artist. It was a strategic document by which the British Navy conducted its trade. And there, on the coast of West Africa, in the region that today is the state of Benin, Bowen inscribed 2 words that should make you stop in your tracks. Kingdom of Judah. Consider this. Why, in the mid-18th century, would the official geographer of the British Crown designate a territory in West Africa by the name of one of the tribes of Israel? Was he uneducated? No, he was the best specialist of his time. He documented what was already known. On this coast lived a population that not only called itself Judah, but also maintained customs that baffled Europeans. Travelers of the time wrote that these people practiced circumcision on the 8th day, observed purity laws, avoided pork, and had a priesthood system strikingly similar to the Levitical one. These were not Khazars who adopted religion for political reasons. These were people whose traditions had been ingrained in their very being for millennia. And here the puzzle begins to form a frightening picture. While the concept of Jewish was being formed in Europe, the true Judah was on another continent, under a different sun. The region marked on maps as Negroland and Kingdom of Judah became the main source of human commodity for the transatlantic slave trade. Millions of people were torn from this land, deprived of their names, their languages, and their memories. They were chained and sent on ships to a land their fathers knew not. Does this ring a bell? This is literally what is written in Deuteronomy 28. And the Lord will bring you back to Egypt in ships, and there you will be sold to your enemies as male and female slaves. So who committed the greatest theft? History tells us that while one group of people adopted the name Israel to maintain their independence and power in Europe, the true bearers of this name were turned into property and erased from history. And to ensure this substitution would never be discovered, the maps were rewritten. After the Berlin Conference of 1884, when the European powers carved up Africa like a pie, the name Kingdom of Judah, Y, disappeared from official maps. It was replaced by administrative names: French West Africa, Dahomey, Slave Coast. Geographical evidence was destroyed, and the memory of who actually crossed the river was buried under layers of colonial lies. I want you to understand the scale of this linguistic trap. If you trick the entire world into believing that the word Jewish signifies the original, and then physically destroy or enslave those who are the original by blood, you gain complete control over a sacred heritage. You gain the right to the land, the right to prophecy, and the right to be considered the chosen ones. And no one will ask questions, because those who could have answered have forgotten their names. They have become bywords. Bywords, as the prophecy predicted. They are called by the names of their masters, or simply by the color of their skin. But maps don't burn, and DNA can't pretend. A study of the Lemba people of South Africa and the Igbo people of Nigeria revealed the presence of the Cohen gene, Cohen modal haplotype, considered a marker of the Levitical priesthood. These people in the depths of Africa bear more genetic similarity to the ancient inhabitants of Jerusalem than many of those who walk its streets today with European passports. Does this sound radical? Perhaps. But these are facts documented in peer-reviewed journals and on maps housed in the British Museum. We are faced with a situation where linguistics has been used as a tool for the colonization of the mind. The suffix -ish has allowed for the creation of a ersatz identity, which over time has become accepted as truth. It was the perfect substitute. One group was given a religion without blood, while the other had its blood taken away, erasing its memory through religion. And today, we live in a world where the mere mention of this connection is considered a conspiracy theory, despite the fact that 18th century royal cartographers documented it in black and white. Consider what this means for your understanding of the modern world. If the Kingdom of Judah was located in West Africa, then who were the people loaded onto the ships? If the Khazar conversion is a historical fact, recognized even by the Jewish Encyclopedia, then who is truly a Jew by birthright? We are confronted with a history that has been turned on its head. And in the next section, we will move on to the most dangerous stage of our investigation. We will look at how this trap operates today. We will examine the concept of Jewishness as a legal construct and see how modern DNA testing technologies in Israel itself are used not to find the truth, but to conceal it. We will see how the circle closes and how the linguistic trap becomes a cage from which there is only one escape, through a return to the original name. We have reached the most dangerous point of our investigation. Up to this point, we have analyzed the linguistic traps of antiquity and 18th century geographical maps. But now we must face the reality of the 21st century. We must ask ourselves, if this substitution was so widespread and systemic, how is it maintained today? Why, in the age of transparency and the global internet, does the truth about the Kingdom of Judah in West Africa and the Khazar origins of European Jews still remain on the periphery of public consciousness? The answer lies in the very structure of the modern state of Israel and how it manages information about origins. And here our investigation leads us to a man whose voice has emerged from the very heart of the Israeli academic community, shattering a decades-long silence. In 2009, Shlomo Sand, a history professor at Tel Aviv University, published a book that caused a political earthquake. It was titled, "Who Invented the Jewish People and How?" Sand is no outside observer or conspiracy theorist. He is an insider, a scholar of the highest caliber. His thesis was simple and devastating. The modern Jewish people is a construct created in the 19th century by nationalist ideologists to justify land claims. Sand demonstrated that the mass expulsion of Jews from Palestine in 70 CE, as portrayed in textbooks, never occurred. The Romans did not deport entire populations. The true story is far more prosaic. Those who remained on the land eventually converted to Islam and became today's Palestinians. Those who call themselves Jewish today are the descendants of numerous communities around the world, from the Khazars in Eurasia to the Berbers in North Africa, who adopted Judaism as a religion at different times. Sand's book became a bestseller in Israel, but it also exposed a huge problem. If Jewish identity is a matter of religion and ideological choice, not blood, then what is the basis for the right of return? And it is here that we encounter the most striking fact of our investigation. While the entire world is enthusiastically taking at-home DNA tests from MyHeritage or Ancestry DNA to find out while it's difficult to trace your roots, the situation in Israel itself is different. Genetic ancestry testing is effectively restricted by law. To officially confirm your Jewishness through DNA, for purposes like marriage or immigration, you often need a ruling from a rabbinical court. Why is a state that claims to have thousands of years of ancestral ties so afraid of free access to the genetic code of its citizens? Is it because the results of mass testing might confirm the linguistic truth of the -ish suffix? That they would show the lack of genetic connection to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the vast majority of the population? While one group defends its status through legal barriers and administrative decrees, another group, the very same ones taken from the slave coast and the lands of the Kingdom of Judah, has begun to awaken. And this awakening is not about politics, it is about blood memory. We must return to the prophecy we mentioned earlier. Deuteronomy 28:37 says, "You will become an object of horror, a byword, and a byword among all the nations where the Lord will drive you." Stop and think about the word byword. In English, it means a nickname, a name that is not your real name, a label that is hung on you to hide your true identity. Look at the history of people forcibly brought to the Americas and the Caribbean. What were they called? First, Negro, then Black, then Colored, later African American. Each of these words is a byword. They are labels based on skin color or geographic continent, but none of them are generic names. None of them indicate tribal descent. This is the greatest linguistic cage. When your name, Ivri, Yehudi, is taken from you and replaced with Negro or Black, you lose your connection to the law, the land, and the prophecies. You become a reverse Jewish. You have blood, but no name, while others have a name, but no blood. This is the very linguistic trap we described at the very beginning. It worked perfectly. It separated form and content. Those who carry the DNA of the ancient Israelites today live under labeled names in the ghettos of America, on the islands of Jamaica, and in the huts of West Africa, believing their history began with slavery. Meanwhile, those who adopted the name with the suffix -ish hold positions in world governments and own land in the Middle East. And the entire world order depends on these two groups never exchanging places in the public consciousness. But why is this important now? Why are we talking about this in 2024? Because technology and information are no longer subject to the censorship of kings and khans. Genetic databases, despite all barriers, are growing, and they reveal something incredible. When African Americans from the southern states or the Caribbean undergo haplogroup testing, they increasingly detect the E1B1A marker. This marker isn't simply African. It correlates with the migration routes of ancient Semitic peoples who moved from the Levant through Egypt deep into Africa, long before the advent of Islam. These are the Ivri, the river crossers. They crossed the Nile, they crossed the Niger, and ultimately they were forced to cross the Atlantic. We are confronted with a historical crime of such magnitude that the human mind refuses to believe it. This is not simply the theft of gold or land. This is the theft of identity itself. This is the theft of God's name from the people to whom it was given, and the transfer of that name to those who simply chose a clever linguistic suffix. And when we look at modern conflicts, wars, and political alliances, we must remember, beneath the surface of politics, there is always a foundation of words. If you control the definitions, you control the world. If you can make people believe that Jewish is the same as Ivri, you can justify any action. I want to ask you right now, if tomorrow it became common knowledge that the kingdom of Judah was located in Africa, and that millions of descendants of slaves are the true heirs of biblical prophecy, what would happen to the world order? What would happen to the legitimacy of states, banks, and religious institutions? This is the reason these maps were hidden in archives. This is the reason why schools don't teach about the Khazar Khaganate. This is the reason linguistics has been turned into a smokescreen. We've presented you with evidence, the linguistic code of the -ish suffix, which directly points to a similarity rather than the original. Historical accounts by Shlomo Sand of the invention of a people. Maps by Emmanuel Bowen where Kingdom of Judah is written in black and white on the coast of Africa. Prophecies that describe with frightening accuracy the fate of those transported on ships and called bywords. And genetic markers that begin to connect the broken threads of history. This isn't the end of the research, it's only the beginning. We urge you not to take our word for it. Go to the libraries, discover the digital archives. Look at the British Museum, search for 18th century maps. Read the works of Israeli professors who weren't afraid to lose their jobs for the sake of truth. History isn't set in stone, it's a living battlefield. And today, your greatest weapon in this battle is your refusal to be deceived by one short suffix. Look at the world again. Do you now see the difference between those who are like and those who are? Do you now understand why the word Jew in its modern sense, is a trap that conceals ivri. Truth isn't found in religion or politics. Truth is found in blood and in the names we had before slave traders and cartographers erased them. I want you to share this video, not because I'm looking for views, but because this knowledge belongs to those from whom it was stolen. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Perhaps you yourself are part of that very diaspora that is beginning to remember its roots. Perhaps you are a researcher who has found other pieces of this puzzle. We need to speak openly about this. We need to break this linguistic cage, because only the truth can truly set us free. Remember, the most powerful thing you can do is keep asking questions. Why did a word change? Who benefits? And where is the true home of those who crossed the river? We will continue to search for answers, no matter how inconvenient they may be. We will open archives and analyze texts until every letter is restored to its rightful place. This is a channel about returning to the roots. This is a channel about the truth that cannot be hidden as long as we have eyes to see and a mind to connect the dots. Thank you for walking this path with me in this deep dive. There are many more discoveries ahead, from the archaeology of ancient Judea to the secret Vatican documents. Subscribe and hit the bell, because history is only just beginning to reveal its true pages. And remember, you are not what they call you. You are who you are by right of your origin. See you in the next investigation. The truth is already here. It's just waiting for you to discover it.